que otras partes entren también en el conflicto. Vamos ya con la entrevista que les comentábamos antes con Alliancebernstein. Tenemos con nosotros a Jeremy Taylor, que es Senior Vice President, Senior Research Analyst and Portfolio Manager for Value Equities in Alliancebernstein. Jeremy,
je sais dire qu'ils en useront.
Thank you so
je
much.
pense qu'il est sage de la part des Européens.
Jeremy, the global energy sector performed very well in the third quarter of this year. What was behind this outperformance in the third quarter?
Well, the short answer is that rising commodity prices, both oil and oil products like diesel, rose quite strongly in the third quarter. The companies are generating a lot of cash, and this backdrop has provided a lot of support to earnings estimates at a time when many sectors of the economy were beginning to struggle. So the question is why energy prices have been so strong. The headlines have been around OPEC action, where Saudi Arabia and Russia both agreed to extend their quota cuts through the end of the year, which surprised the market, given that the fourth quarter is normally a time of strong oil demand. And people expected that they would actually increase supply. More recently, of course, there's been another wave of geopolitics, increasing the risk premium. And all of this has meant that investors in commodities have been more focused on oil again.
At the same time, we've been seeing renewable energy, we've been seeing a lag in renewable energy. What's been going on there?
Well, renewables are capital intensive. The cost of financing is a very important factor for developers of wind and solar farms. Rising interest rates and the view that they would stay stronger for longer has then put up the cost of building renewables generation. And in some cases, that has meant that projects have struggled for profitability. This has mainly been in the area of US offshore wind farms. Elsewhere, wind and solar farms still look quite competitive with the alternative versus the alternatives of coal and gas generation. But at this point, it feels like investors are waiting to see the peak in interest rates before engaging again with renewables companies. It hasn't been helped that some of the highest profile renewables companies were trading on quite high valuations before this year, and so had less protection against disappointment in this area. But valuations now look really quite reasonable again.
Despite short-term headwinds around interest rates and valuations, are there still long-term opportunities in the renewable sector?
Oh, absolutely. As I mentioned, so wind and solar still looks quite cost competitive versus gas or coal generation, even before we start to think about energy transition and the pressing need to reduce carbon intensity. Corporates still remain very interested in buying more green energy, and governments have been very supportive. We've seen this with the US stimulating investment through the Inflation Reduction Act, and Europe acting to improve and streamline planning processes to encourage faster renewable generation. With valuations back to more interesting levels, the sector looks well positioned.
Where do you see opportunities in the traditional and renewable sector right now, currently?
Well, as I mentioned, the pure play renewable companies have come back to more reasonable valuations, but we see even more value in two areas. One of them is in the traditional utilities, particularly those that have very big, successful wind and solar businesses already. We think you can get access to the same attractive themes at even more attractive valuations. And we also look for companies that are enabling the growth of renewables. For example, contractors who are building grid connections and allowing wind and solar farms to be hooked up to the grid. Again, we think these are a little overlooked and offer some attractive valuations.
Possible, Jeremy, to invest in energy and support the climate change agenda or energy transition?
We believe so. Some of the large energy companies are already very big marketers of energy of all sorts. Their customers, business and consumers, need help to move away from hydrocarbons and buy green energy. And some of these companies have strategies and capabilities that are focused on replacing hydrocarbons with things like green power, biofuels, electric vehicle charging, hydrogen, or even helping companies capture carbon and sequester it in the ground as a way of reducing their clients' carbon emissions. All of this, we think, are quite interesting business opportunities that are also helping to take the world in the right direction.
Jeremy Taylor, Senior Vice President, Senior Research Analyst and Portfolio Manager for Value Equities in Alliancebernstein. It's been a pleasure to have you here, Jeremy. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Bueno, pues nos hablaba Jeremy Taylor de las oportunidades que todavía hay vigentes en el sector de la energía renovable, pero también en la energía tradicional. Nos hablaba del motivo por el que se ha comportado tan bien este sector en el tercer trimestre. Y con esto nos despedimos. Les dejamos enseguida con Sergio Fernández, con Criptonegocios. Y como siempre, es un placer haber pasado la tarde con ustedes. Muchísimas gracias.